Rainier Avenue Radio. And welcome to our live studio audience for another exciting edition of Did You Know? And here we go with round one. Did you know?
The COVID vaccine is free and easy to get. You don't need insurance or an appointment to get your vaccine. Vaccines are available at many locations near you.
And now we're going to double the value. Did you know?
The COVID-19 vaccine is always free of cost. You can visit pharmacies, community health centers, and other health providers in your neighborhood.
And now for the lightning round. Did you know?
The Delta variant of COVID is a mutation that has health experts worried because it's twice as contagious.
Then for our finale. Did you know?
The best way to protect yourself from the COVID Delta variant is to get fully vaccinated. Get your vaccine today.
Find out more at kingcounty.gov/vaccine. Did you know?
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I'm Granville Emerson along with my partner,
Ronald Pepe Bean.
And we host the show Little Line Sports right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.world, where we talk about football, basketball,
Local sports,
national sports, Seahawks,
UW,
Seattle U Redhawks,
Garfield Bulldogs.
all that and more right here on Little Line Sports on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Welcome to the Fitness Corner. I'm your host, Mark Bryant, and you're going to get a whole total body workout on my show, starting off with a warm-up, aerobics, strength training, cool down, and stretching every Friday from 11:30 to 12 right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines being produced faster?
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio.world. You're listening to HeartBeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. HeartBeat Radio is a conversation aimed to take the pulse of corporate America. Opportunities for people of color, we're getting lost in the shuffle of change. I'm that provocateur of change. The hearts of corporate America are addressed. Access and opportunities will be accelerated for all people. Through HeartBeat Radio, you will gain a deeper understanding of what is necessary for change.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to HeartBeat Radio. It is the fall. I have been off air for the month of August, so I'm excited to be back on air and picking back up where we left off. Before I introduce my guest tonight, my special co-host, who will need no introduction, phenomenal person. I can't wait to talk with her tonight. I just want to remind you of a couple of things about why we're doing HeartBeat. And I feel compelled to do this kind of often just to keep people grounded in the work and the conversations that we are having on this show. I don't know if you're paying attention to national news, but we are losing voices of prominent news anchors who are the truth tellers. Recently, CNN was purchased by a new person that is a Trump-backed person, and I'm starting to watch the changes that are happening on that show, including some pretty big departures from that show. It is incredibly important that we all understand that our voices, that the media has a responsibility to tell the truth. Now, some people would say that it's a journalist's job to be neutral. I would say it's not neutrality that's important, it's the truth that's important. And so, media outlets, Black media outlets, HeartBeat Radio and podcast, we are about looking at systems, the systems that are in place that are creating injustice for Brown and Black people. Let me also remind you that this is kind of the biblical definition of it, but when the least of thee are provided for and cared for, everyone prevails from that. And so I just wanted to restate that going into the fall season again, as we begin to dig into some of these different systems at play right now, education, housing, all the different things you hear us talking about on the show. So that's how I'm going to start the show this evening. Before I introduce my special co-host coming on with me tonight, I'm going to say to you that I consider Erin Jones to be just a sister. She is a fierce advocate. She is an educator. She has run for public office for the public superintendent role. Coincidentally, today happens to be the first day of school, sort of. Erin she's an activist. She does so much in our community. She is an author. She is a speaker. She has done a lot to advance equity for students. And so it is my humble honor to bring her back. She has been on with me in the past. Let's welcome Erin Jones back to HeartBeat Radio and podcast this evening. There she is. I think you're muted, Erin.
I am. It's like this mute, so I gotta make sure everything's together. Thank you so much for having me. See, check me out though, y'all. I'm supporting the storm. We didn't talk last night, but I am still a storm believer. So I'm wearing storm gear for the next few days.
You are. Were you at the game last night?
Oh yes. Oh
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had to see Sue's last game. I was like, hey, if this is her last game, I need to be there. And unfortunately, it was her last game. And I don't know if you know that I tried out the year before she was drafted.
No, I did not know that.
She actually came down and coached for a day with me in Tacoma when I coached middle school.
Awesome.
She was my girl. So I had to be there last night.
That is very cool. Yes, it's very fun to watch our storm. I saw, I've gone to 2 of the games this year, and I saw the game where Lauren Jackson came back. I used to be an avid. I used to have season tickets to the storm, and used to sit. It's in Ann Donovan days, and so I used to sit right behind their bench and get to listen to all the talk. And me and my fixation with basketball. But I used to love that they are just so absolutely awesome. One of the only winning teams here in Seattle. Yeah, I said that. Women's basketball.
Yeah, winningest team in Seattle. So.
Winningest team. Yep. Yeah. I have invited them onto this show, so I'm just going to see. I was able to get, thanks to you, for some connections. I got to some people, so let's see if we can make that happen. That'd be awesome. I'm glad you're joining tonight. I didn't script out the show as much as I normally do, but I really wanted to have you on. And then it just coincidentally, when I had reached out to you about coming on with me, all the other school things started to happen. So I'm like, there's no better person to actually have on today than you. And so I'd just love to talk to you about what's going on here in Washington State, in the Seattle area. We've got teacher strikes going on. It's back to school day. Do you want to talk about your thoughts? I mean, you're out in the schools. You've been traveling the country and talking it to superintendents and districts. What are you hearing? What's going on?
So a couple things that just jump out at me today, because I have been all over the country. Number one, I'm looking at states that are non-unionized, and just what is happening with their educators just leaving the profession altogether in droves because they don't get support. So I just want us to be aware here for those people that are really angry with educators in our state who are striking. I want to offer that when we don't support our educators, they don't stay in the profession. And we're seeing that in huge numbers in non-unionized states. And so you may not like the union, but what the union does is it makes sure that our educators are taken care of. As a mom and a career educator, I was a classroom teacher for 15 years and then an administrator for another 10 years. Our students are only as healthy as our educators are. And if we're not investing in our educators, they can't be good for our students. And so one of the things is I traveled to states last year that were not unionized, just watching the ways that educators were trampled on and had no sense of advocacy, had no sense of autonomy, were told, here's what you will teach, here's how you will teach it, here are the books that are coming out of your classroom. In the state of Washington, we don't have that because we have a really strong teachers union. And so I've watched, I was on the road when Kent went on strike. So I've been opening school districts across the state so I was in DC for the National Superintendent's Conference 2 weeks ago. And then I was on the road for the last 2 weeks, every single day, opening school districts. So either whole districts or individual school buildings. And while we were in Yakima was when the Kent school district strike started. And I follow educators on TikTok, and there's a number of Kent teachers that have TikTok videos about the strike. And so I was watching and listening. And then, of course, Seattle went on strike today, officially. All during that time, my husband's district, my husband is in North Thurston. All of the districts here, so Olympia, Tumwater, North Thurston, which are the 3 largest districts in our region, were considering strike until last week. And so I'm watching him navigate that. And he's a head football coach also. So if they were to go on strike, it would also mean that he couldn't coach. So he was trying to navigate that. He'd been very involved in thinking about the strike 2 years ago before he was a head football coach in a different way than he had to think about it this time. And so I know he supports the union absolutely. And he was really heartbroken to think that maybe his students wouldn't be able to play this week. And we just talked tonight before he got home from practice right before I got on. And I said, so what do you think about the strike in Seattle? And what I would encourage listeners, I would encourage you to go and look at what the demands are from both Kent and Seattle. Look clearly. So teachers are not just saying, we're not working until you pay us more, pay us more. It's not just about paying us more. In fact, I would argue that pay is not the number one issue. It's how are we being given not just financial compensation, but time? How are we being treated and considered for the extra things you're asking us to do? So you are asking us often to have more students in our classroom. And I offer, my husband has had over 150 students in his classroom for the last 2 years, which is, as a head football coach, that's a lot of students in an English classroom. That means he's reading 150 papers. People don't think about the class size and how that impacts educators. And so I know for Seattle, for sure, they're asking for smaller class sizes. And it's not just so that it's easier. For those of you that have never taught before, I want you to think about what it would mean if I put you at a Chuck E. Cheese with 25 kids that you had to manage all day, or 35. That extra 10 makes a huge difference. And then imagine for our secondary folks, that's 25 to 30 times 5 class periods a day. So especially in response to COVID, where students are coming to us, really, students have experienced trauma. So have the adults, but students have experienced trauma, and they are showing up with some severe social emotional needs that when you now add 5 students per class to students who are already suffering from some mental health stuff and just social emotional anxiety, all that stuff, that is a huge weight. And what educators are saying is don't add extra to us when we're already dealing with extra coming out of the biggest pandemic any of us have ever experienced. And that's where my husband said it really best. He said, this is complicated. It's not as easy as, man, teachers should just go back to their classrooms. And it's also not as easy as, man, just get out there and get on the picket lines until you get more money. It's complicated. And
you want to know what's running through my head as you're describing all of this?
Yeah.
What you're describing is identical. Your lens has been on the public education system. My lens has been the corporate America ecosystem. They are identical, what is happening in both worlds, right? So we had on the show a few months ago, we had Melly Miller. Do you know Melly from Seattle Credit Union? Melly, she's the CEO. She was talking about some work that they're doing in the credit union around equity and around a compensation model, because people are being asked, so that in every role at jobs, people are being asked to do the jobs of 2 and 3 people for one person's pay. And so they started to set up a system now to try to help edge some of that off. But the point I wanted to make is this. What you're describing to me is it's the systems that we are living in this society have come to a head. Everything has come to a head.
Not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. It's exactly right. And so trying to solve these issues with only pay, like what you said, it's not just about pay, but only focusing on that is not going to solve the deeper problems of inequity where people are burnt out, because everything you described, mental health, I'm hearing it. Every person I talk to in business is dealing with this.
Yeah.
Today was the day. There's some articles in the paper. I don't want to detract from what you're talking about, but the corporations have been requiring people to come back to work. And today was the first day that many organizations wanted everybody back on site, and they're rebelling and saying, no, we're not coming back. Like, we are sick of the toxicity. So similar to what teachers are dealing with, right? You throw them into a system that is complex, as your husband said, and they are having to work. I don't want to diminish it, but like every other person who's working, people are all pulling 80-hour weeks now trying to keep up, and that's not sustainable.
Right. It's like, we and I get to see, I work with government agencies too, and we're seeing that in civil servants as well. I just think one of the things that the pandemic has done, and I would argue also the political unrest, it's helped people in a really painful way realize that how we are living is dehumanizing. It's not human. We have made, and I think it's the fault of capitalism personally, but our desire to get ahead and to make more and to be successful. I talk a lot about thriving in my work, not success, because I think success is the hamster wheel. Success is not sustainable. It's not healthy. It's not about flourishing. It's about acquiring more. And acquiring more means we got to step on somebody. But flourishing is about how do we all create a better place for all of us to cohabitate.
Did you hear Michelle Obama's speech today, similar to that? On the end, she, I'll just kind of paraphrase, but she, with the unveiling of their portraits today, she talked about, everybody being able to prosper and how we focus everything on money. I've talked about it on the show too. We focus so much on money. It's our relationship with money in the society. You just called it capitalism. It is. It's we can't ever have enough, and people don't have any joy in their lives anymore. It has killed people's ability. And so when the pandemic hit, people were able to get rest. Yeah. They were off the freeways 4 hours a day. They were not sitting under the thumb of some manager browbeating them to death to get things done. They started to experience something different, and disproportionately it is students and people that look like you and I that suffer the most in these situations.
Right. And we're also, of course, I mean, this goes back to how you opened tonight. We also have the least amount of voice and power in space. And so, and it's why I'm on the road every day. Like, people ask, why are you so crazy busy? Why do you keep doing the work? Because it's so important. And I think and this is something that I just shared in a training yesterday about equity. White people are dying because of this too. They just don't realize it. They don't realize it, but they have a cancer too. And it's this whole scarcity mentality that if I give away to you, it means you're taken from me. And what I say to people all the time, if it's a pizza and I feed you pizza and you're healthy and you're fed, then you can go make your own pizza. And now we have more pizza instead of there's just this one little pie. And if I give you, if we feed everybody in the room, then we're all healthier and able to go out and make more pie. And then maybe some steak and maybe some baklava and maybe, there's all this stuff that we could do if we weren't so worried about, but if I give some up, I'm going to lose something. No, you're actually going to gain something by being more human.
Yeah, that is it's always a tough. I started the show that way tonight because I try to remind people why I do this work, and because a lot of my listeners are white. And so I have people reach out. They are learning from these conversations. That's why I continue to have them, so that they can hear the nature of the work, what you do and I do, these other guests. Political systems, I mean, I have focused on that heavily because policy is the only vehicle we have to change outcomes, because we can't, the other organizations and people are not going to change unless we force those things to be changed. It's not being done willingly. And so when I think back or look back at schools, you know, today's first day of school, and you know, what must parents be experiencing today when parents are also dealing with their own anxiety of their employment and the things that they are responsible to do and feed their children and keep a roof over their head. And oh, by the way, like in some districts, and I'm curious to what you think about this, but looking at such Bellevue School District, are you following what's going on in the Bellevue School District around the student resource officers? So they're going to be putting police officers in the schools. And so there's a lot of anxiety. I just talked with one of their school board members this past week, and you know, there's a lot of anxiety because we have diversified the school board there, and now that we're starting to have advocacy and progress for the brown and black students. Now, look, I understand safety in the schools, and I understand why they're having conversations given the school shootings. I don't know what the answer is around bringing police officers into school districts, but I do know that who's going to get targeted, right?
We see that. We see that. So I just on that point, I spent some time talking with Seattle public school students and families about policing, not this last year, but the year before that, the year of George Floyd's murder. And what's interesting is there are really mixed opinions about resource officers. Now, I talked with a Black mom who said, do you know the resource officer at my kid's school was Uncle Joe, who everybody knew from the block, and he was their advocate. And so, man, if that's the case, that is a really great resource to have in your building. However, that is not the norm. The norm is you bring often a guy, not always a man, but often a man from not the community, who doesn't understand the culture of that community, who doesn't understand the dynamics of that community. And that's where policing becomes really harmful, is when you don't understand, man, Joe is just going through a tough day. This is what's happened in his life. And he's mouthing off, not because he's a bad kid, but because this stuff went down. And if you're in the community, you know that. If you're not in the community, you just see Joe as somebody who needs to be policed. Right. And so I think we need to be having those honest conversations around what does safety look like and for whom? For whom are we? Because here's another truth that, I don't know, maybe some people don't want to hear. For the most part, school shootings are not happening in Black and brown spaces.
That's exactly right.
Right. So let's be honest about where does that policing need to happen? It's interesting to me that the first place we want to put police is actually not where, well, Bellevue is interesting, but the kids that end up being harmed are not the ones doing the school shooting. And that's a conversation that we just have not wanted to have publicly. And I'm sure there are some people that will be offended by that. But if you look at the history of who is doing school shootings, it is for the most part not female. It is white males.
Correct.
So
beyond the school shootings, you know, again, these are the taboo conversations that people don't want to have, but we have to have, because beyond the school shootings, you just look at outside, but look at who's committing these crimes. And historically in this country, we don't hold white people accountable. And so we're just starting for anything. I don't just mean shootings. I mean, for anything, it's been very difficult to get justice in any shape or form, and the extremes that have to be gone to have that, to hold people accountable, is beyond what any human being should have to deal with. And yet that's the plight. And then, you know, again, since 2016, ain't none of us who look like us been able to even stop breathing, because we still have the drama happening back in DC, where now we have a master coming in to look at everything that's so friggin' obvious, but we can't get justice because we have to go through hoops, and those guys are never held accountable.
I mean, because you and I both do this work of DEI, you know, I tell people that's what white privilege is. White privilege is not that just because you're a white person, life is going to be good. What white privilege does mean, though, is that if there's an opportunity for the benefit of the doubt, you will get it.
Yeah.
I'm not getting the benefit of the doubt. My husband is not getting the benefit of the doubt. But if you are white, you will at least have the benefit of the doubt. And that's how I describe white privilege. I know it gets people's panties in a bunch, but the reality is, and we see this on a very public stage right now. Imagine President Barack Obama having that many documents. I mean, even a fraction of that many documents left in his residence right now. Imagine what the consequences would be. I just can't imagine that they would be the same.
And what many people may not understand about that point is that I've heard people try to shrug it off as if, oh, it's Donald Trump. What you have to understand is that Donald Trump and his behaviors are a microcosm of the rest of the behaviors of America. So what he's doing that everybody sees on a national stage, people like me and you see it in our everyday lives and how it plays out with lack of accountability, can lie through their teeth. People believe it. And yet this is still just being perpetuated. You know, I saw this meme today and I literally fell out laughing out loud. It was a picture of Hillary on the phone saying, why, yes, I actually do have some time. Oh, there's a master you need for an investigation. Like, wouldn't that just be justice to have her be the person to come? Like, people cheated, all of these things. I can't even hardly put it into words tonight because it's so egregious. And yet every single day we have to sit here and watch this on the news and be traumatized by this BS and have to look over our shoulders when we go out for a run. I mean, I don't know if you heard about the woman who got, we have no safety. There's no safety happening right now. So
I want to go back to school and make a case around what you just described with the former president and what's happening in school spaces right now. And just offer up, especially to the white people listening right now. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Christopher Rufo. So Christopher Rufo is the originator of the anti-critical race theory movement. So if you just look for Christopher Rufo, R-U-F-O, on Twitter, you will find him. He is what he calls himself, a conservative activist. But I think most people are not aware. First of all, he's in Gig Harbor. So the entire movement around anti-critical race theory in schools started in Washington State. Started right here in our state with a gentleman who lives in Gig Harbor who got on Fox News and complained about a training that Seattle City had gone through, had required all their staff to go through. And he claimed that all staff in Seattle were told that they were racist if they were white. And he claimed that it was all critical race theory. And so he got on Fox News, shared about that training, which was fabricated. They did do training, but it wasn't critical race theory. And then President Trump happened to watch that evening and heard what Christopher Rufo said. And if you remember, the next day he put out an executive order that no government agency can do diversity work anymore. I don't know if you remember that. It happened 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago. I think it was September of 2020. Anyway, that was when it began. Christopher Rufo tweeted out, speaking to this lying through their teeth. Christopher Rufo tweeted out later, I am going to make everything conservatives hate critical race theory. I'm just going to make it all critical race theory. And we're just going to lump it all under the term CRT. And that's how we're going to win this culture war. He literally tweeted that out. Like, talk about disingenuous, right? He knew it was not all critical race theory, but he said, if I can just make all the things that we don't like into CRT, and then we can attack CRT. So this is something that your listeners need to be paying attention to. He tweeted out, I think on July 9th, this summer, the next thing I'm targeting after critical race theory is gender identity in schools, gender identity and sexual orientation. And he had 11 articles that he posted out on his page and said, this is our next target. And so I just want people to be aware. He is very intentional, and it's not coming from a good place at all. It's coming from a place of power. How can we take over schools? How can we defund schools? How can we privatize education? And so he's an example of somebody very powerful. He's got a very powerful platform. There are school districts in the state of Washington that now have made critical race theory illegal to teach in schools. And not only that, they never define it. So it's never defined. Nobody can ever give a definition for what it is. But there's a district that I'm not going to name because I don't want to get this person in trouble, that just listed out in a new policy 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, cannot teach about systemic racism in classrooms, cannot talk about the history of slavery. Like, they listed out all the things that teachers are not allowed to talk about.
Erin, pause there for a quick second. We're going to take a quick station ID and pick right back up right there. We'll be right back.
That up in Saks, I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Struggling to pay your mortgage? If COVID-19 hurt your job or your business, you may be eligible for homeowner assistance funds from the government. Call 1-877-894-4663 now or visit WashingtonHalf.org. That's WashingtonHAF.org. Because falling on hard times does not have to mean losing your home.
Welcome to the Fitness Corner. I'm your host, Mark Bryant, and you're going to get a whole total body workout on my show, starting off with a warm-up, aerobics, strength training, cool down, and stretching every Friday from 11:30 to 12 right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of StarTime, and back in my day, when we wanted to hear the radio, we had to stick a couple of coat hangers on Grandpa's head so his cavity fillings could pick up an AM station. But it's the 21st century now, so whenever I want to hear Rainier Avenue Radio .world, I listen to it on the brand new Rainier Avenue Radio app on my Android or iPhone. Download it for free at the Google Play Store or the iPhone App Store. The Rainier Avenue Radio .world app.
The beat of the Fox with nastiness is back on K-Fox Night Beat.
Yo, what's the deal? It's the legendary Hall of Fame DJ Mixmaster Ice. UTFO.
What's up? Who you thought this is? This is Sir Mix-a-Lot.
And this is Terry Lewis.
And I'm Grand Mixer GMS.
What's up, y'all? This is DJ Third Degree.
This is JJ Hudson from the High Children family.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
That's my noise.
Peace.
Are you a small business owner in Seattle who was impacted by COVID-19? The Seattle Office of Economic Development is investing $8 million to connect small businesses to operating capital. The Small Business Capital Access Program will lower the cost of Washington State Small Business Flex Fund loans by paying down 25% of the loan principal. Eligible small businesses can borrow up to $150,000 with a 4% interest rate to cover expenses like payroll, rent, utilities, and supplies.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
That up in Saks, I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.
Welcome back to HeartBeat Radio and Podcast. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. Joining me, co-hosting and talking with me tonight is the infamous Erin Jones. Let's bring her back in. We were to Erin talk about critical race theory, the Christopher Rufo and the target, I'll use the word target, that is now being put on LGBTQ students. The hateful rhetoric that is manifesting right here in Washington State. You said he was at a Gig Harbor. Do you want to continue talking about that issue, Erin?
Yeah, so I actually just did an interview with Cairo News. So my brother-in-law works at Cairo News, Jesse. Some of y'all may know who Jesse is.
Jesse, yeah.
And it wasn't actually him that did the interview. There was another one of his colleagues that was talking about, man, it feels like there's more bullying happening in Washington State this year. And Jesse said, well, my sister-in-law does work in schools. You should interview her. And he ended up doing a 90-minute interview with me. And what I shared with him is this last year as a consultant, I was in more buildings for targeted either verbal harassment or physical bullying of Black children, trans children, and queer identifying. Those three groups of children, there were more kind of out there explicit attacks on their bodies and their identities than I've seen in 32 years of work in education. And so I did an interview about that. And that is just the state of Washington. I'm not even talking about the work I did outside of our state, but right here in our state. And so, you know, to have somebody like Christopher Rufo have a national platform to say, we can't talk about Black history. We can't read about Black characters in textbooks. We can't have Black figures in libraries. And then we can't talk about gender and gender identity. And at the same time, I'm seeing these children being attacked.
Well,
there's a correlation there.
Well, Erin, you know, who has control over maybe let me ask this question. There are other options for brown and Black children to be able to go to school without having to be subject to be in those particular in the public school system. Now, this is another taboo kind of conversation because, you know, I am not anti-union by any means. I'm very pro-union, but I'm also pro-people, and I'm pro making sure our children get educated. And so, you know, I'm watching some of the movement here in Washington State. I'm watching people pull their kids. I've had them on the show here. Yeah. I've had parents come on and students come on who will not put their children in these pipelines. These are prison pipelines where they're being bullied, and they're not going to be believed when they tell the principal what happened. The default belief will be to the white student, not the Black students. We all know that. We don't need to sugarcoat that. What are your thoughts about options for education for students?
So here's the challenge for me. Most of the spaces that I'm going to are spaces where there are 2 or 3 Black students in a community, or maybe there are 10, but they're places that are rural, they're remote, or they're just predominantly white communities. And so as much as I would love for students to have the opportunity to attend like a charter school, there are no charter schools, they're for them. And so what's happening for a lot of Black and brown students and Black and brown families and LGBTQIA families, is they are being forced to put their kids in online school, which is great for some children. It's not great for every child. And so it breaks my heart that families are being forced to make choices to pull their children out of spaces where students should be learning how to socialize with each other, and they're not able to because it's not a safe environment. And so, you know, our large cities can afford to do charter schools, and I have mixed emotions about charter schools. I've seen them done really well, and I've seen them do incredible harm to especially Black and brown, poor, and special kids with special needs, students with learning challenges, students with who are
Well, in some of those regards, I mean, I am clearly not in the education space like you are, so do not consider myself an expert in education. I am a massive advocate for education. Yeah. Everybody who knows my kid knows what I went through to help make sure he got educated. But even here in Washington State, you know, we do have options for parents to be able to put their children in, pull them out of these systems. And so these systems are not serving brown and Black kids 100%. Mm-hmm. And so when I see that, you know, I have visited, I have seen some of these charter schools, I have seen what they're doing. But brown and Black children are being harmed by I'm just going to use the term previous white leadership who has exploited and mismanaged money and all the things that come along with the criticism of charter schools. Yeah. But that is being held against the brown and Black students and schools that are actually having our children thrive. And so how do we educate our legislators that this is not a one size fits all, that we've got to think different about? I get holding accountability, but we have to hold accountability to who are the problem makers, not every institution that's trying to have options to it. So that's kind of my lens on it. Yeah. And if we don't do something quickly, I mean, I read the data on where we are with high school graduation rates of kids going on to college. Like our numbers are just they're dropping and dropping and dropping. And I'm a businesswoman, so let's just talk about business for a second. The harm that that is going to be created for. Look at Joy commenting on this, and she's not.
I see
Where you at, Joy? Where you at?
She's not supposed to be here.
The kids, I lost my train of thought. The legislators, I feel, are missing the boat in many regards because business needs our students to be educated. And if our students are not getting educated, we're continuing to put them down further and further behind and not be able to compete globally for jobs and earning opportunities and wealth and all the things that I'm out here working to change, right?
Can I offer a suggestion?
Yeah.
So I think, number one, I don't think charter schools are the answer. And I also don't think they're the nemesis of public education in the way that sometimes they're painted. I would offer, though, that I think what is needed is for school district leaders to get more creative about how they are using their education spaces. And I'll just give you an example. So last week, one of the buildings that got to open was Maritime High School. Maritime High School is a school in Highline School District that is maritime. It's dealing with all things related to boating, the boating industry. It is run by a Black man. A Black man is the principal there. Really phenomenal. And they are serving a super diverse group of students. And what's really exciting is these students who never would have had an opportunity to be on the water are now getting to be on the water. And this is a regular school. Well, it's not an alternative school. They want to be really careful to not call it, because we have all kinds of narratives around alternative schools, but it is a choice school. And in fact, people may not know this, but students can attend Maritime from any district in the state of Washington. So there are children that drive up every day from Olympia. There are children that drive down from Bellevue. I think that district leaders need to get creative about having more options for students so that there are schools like that. In the district that I'm in, North Thurston, I will never forget, we had moved here from Spokane where my kids struggled. You know, they were the only Black children in their school. And my kids needed something different. And when we got here, my youngest son is on the autism spectrum, but he's also gifted. And I knew the regular school was not going to be great for him. We got so lucky because his first year of middle school, they opened a school called Aspire Middle School. And it was a school that was STEM, it was music, and it was gifted education. And so my son got all of the things that he needed in this really small environment. And it was really beautiful. You know, every school district should have a school like Aspire.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what's the one in Des Moines that Russell and Ciara stood up? It's an academy. Why not you Academy?
Yeah. I think
so that's another, you know, I watch their work too, because they don't come forthright out and say this is what they stood up, but everybody knows that we have to have other options. That's more of the important issue.
The comprehensive high school is not for everybody. The comprehensive high school is not for everybody. Now, the challenge for charter schools, and anytime, Maritime talked about this a little bit last week because they're a smaller school. The challenge for charter schools often is they just don't have the capacity, because they're smaller, to have the special education support and the ELL support. And that's where that can become a challenge for our Black and Brown students who need that extra support. And so we've got to think creatively about how do we make sure that in those smaller spaces where they don't have enough FTE, that how could we collaborate? Like how could maybe multiple charter schools share somebody who has expertise around language learning, who has expertise around, how do we get, but I think, to be honest, having served at the assistant state superintendent level, we just are not very creative. Like we have the prototypical funding model and we fund schools based on how many students are there. We don't think about what each community needs. We do the same at the district level. We say, well, there are so many kids in this neighborhood, so we're going to build this high school that serves this many kids, and it's going to have these programs. And our kids are not boxes. Our kids are not boxes.
Let me offer a controversial opinion about that.
Yeah.
You know, is it that we aren't creative, or is it that our unions have so much power that they're not allowing anything to go outside of those unions because it's taken away from them? And so when you talk about, so I'm a pro-union person, but I'm also watching that, they carry a lot of power in the state, the WEA, lots of power in the state of Washington.
Yeah.
And if our students are not being served by unionized facilities, schools, then we must have options. And I think that the union, I have watched more politicians be too afraid. This is why I'd rather talk about this topic with you about this, because the politicians are too afraid to tackle this issue, because if they tackle this issue around options for kids for education, then they run the risk of pissing off the union and not getting reelected. And so politics is controlling. That's why I bring on a lot of elected officials here to talk about this, because we have to solve this problem outside of the normal ecosystem that is not supporting our children. And so, I don't want to belabor that, but I want to throw that out, that that's part of the problem, is they can't tackle this problem because they are too afraid to have a conversation and talk about this very issue. And yet look what's happened today in the news, right? They're not going to attract teachers of color. Teachers of color are not going to come into these public school systems and try to teach when they are berated, when they are not heard, when they are underpaid, when cops are that's not a model that's working for people. So something we're got to start to pivot, I think, or have many more maritime academies, or other options for our kids, because I do panic and worry that our younger children are just being set up to fail. They're set up to fail. They will not be able to compete and have earning power if we don't start to solve this, getting our kids educated. Period.
So I would agree with you that the union becomes a barrier to charter schools for sure, because once you pull once you pull money and resources out of the public school FTE, that becomes a problem. But I would argue that the union, schools like Maritime are not affected by the union. I mean, those are still union teachers that are teaching in a different environment. And that's where I think school district leaders need to get brave and courageous and say, we're going to try some new stuff. That big high school there with 2,000 kids is not working. It's not working for everybody. And how do we get creative and think outside the box? I would agree with you. And one of the things that got me in a lot of trouble when I ran for state superintendent is I shared at one point, the ultimate purpose of the union is to protect and serve educators. It's not to serve children. And I know people don't like to hear that. And I'm going to say, like you, I think the union is critical. Like, I get it. My husband is a union member. It's absolutely necessary. And the point of the union is not about the children. That's not the point of the point is about the adults that work in the system. That's the whole point of a union, is to protect them. And so there does become this conflict that happens. And one of the things I would offer, and I've had the opportunity to talk with a person of color who works for the union now, full-time job, who also has children in the system. And it's been a really interesting journey for him the last couple of years working on the inside. Because he's conflicted, and he's all about equity work too, and conflicted with sometimes the point of the union works against doing equity work, right? And so, but like you said, we have to have these conversations though, because in the end, if we're not having these conversations, everyone is missing out.
Correct. Correct. Let me pivot just a quick second, because every time I talk to you, I know the time just flies. I wanted to hear your thoughts also about, it's still about education, but the whole backlash on the student loan debt relief. What were your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. So ridiculous. I was so mad okay, so here's what I would offer. I think there is an argument to be made that the way that program works is not, so maybe there's more that could have been done. So that argument I don't disagree with. However, what I heard, and you'll appreciate this as a Jesus girl, what I find incredibly disingenuous is people who are praying, forgive us our debt as we forgive others who debt against us, now pissed off about having debt forgiven.
You mean all the people whose debt was paid on the cross, who now don't want to have such a small, it is a small amount of money, tiny considering what kind of debt. It's brown and black people, right? Pell Grants are predominantly, they are the exploitation to try to prohibit brown and black people from getting educated. And so to give a small hint of relief from that, it's small. $10,000 is not a lot. People are carrying $80,000. I mean, look, my MBA was $100,000. Like, it's a lot of money to get educated. And so, you know, people don't understand, like, okay, they said, well, you shouldn't take out debt that you can't pay. No, you don't seem to understand how that system actually works. And now they're fighting. I read today, who's the Florida? Is it Ted Cruz in Florida? You know, they're trying to find ways to roll that back because they don't want to see brown and black people succeed. And so this rolls right back into what we've been talking about this hour, which is, you know, our ability to get our young people educated so that they and their families can prosper is a fight against the white right, who want to have every penny and every dollar there is to be made in this country. They don't want to see brown and black families succeed. And so I will reiterate, you know, back to the unions and, you know, the systems that we have in place are failing our families. They are failing. And I would actually say they have failed in many regards. So we got to be able to, Marco Rubio, that's it. Thank you, Gwen.
But there's also the challenge. And I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again because it absolutely applies here. White people are losing out when black people don't flourish. White people are having to pay for incarcerations of black people that are incarcerated for no reason. I mean, you're going to spend your money one way or the other. If you were to invest it in the flourishing of black and brown people, then you could flourish even more than you're flourishing now. But because you're so, I tell people all the time, I tell kids all the time, if you're holding your hands tight, you also can't receive. And that's what I feel like, holding so tight to power and opportunity that they actually can't even receive more. And so what these folks that are so angry about this loan forgiveness seem to be missing is, man, y'all are missing an opportunity for the flourishing of your own community. And you're missing the boat. And I think,
well, they have been taught, Erin, speaking of education, they have been taught that everything that doesn't look like them is inferior to them. Michelle Obama touched on that on her speech today. They have been taught that they are superior and that other people are inferior. And so their mentality, look, I'm doing a show later this month on the show Mrs. America. Have you seen Mrs. America on Hulu?
No.
Anybody who has not seen that series needs to watch it. Because if you want to understand, it's about the Equal Rights Amendment. It's about women's issues, what it's the Shirley Chisholm, Gloria Steinem, but you gotta see this. You just gotta see these women. You gotta see what they're being taught and what they uphold, and at any cost. And everything, so that was back in what 50s and 60s in that era, and everything that's in that show is a reflection of exactly what's going on today. And so, you know, can we unteach people's way out of it? I don't think so. I mean, this is, again, why I call it HeartBeat. This is a heart condition in this country. And this heart condition here is about white is right and anything else is not. And so we've got.
I want to jump off that because it goes to something that I listen to podcasts all the time. And there was a podcaster talking about Make America Great Again. And it was really in reference to the Biden speech last week that got so much hate. And I would offer that I think there are exactly the people that Biden was talking about, the crazy mega Make America Great Again really is calling back to that time in the 40s and 50s, right? Yeah. It's that post World War II when women were still at home. And, you know, that's the time that we're calling back to. and not we, people who are saying make America great again, that's the time. And I would argue that it's a time that didn't exist. The way that they are imagining it didn't actually exist and wouldn't be great for women. It wouldn't be great for so many people. If we actually went back to that time, it wouldn't be as fabulous as it has been made out to be. But the challenge is that particular group of people, you're correct. And the church has weaponized that. And this is where, I hold so many leaders in church spaces responsible for at least not speaking up about it, perpetuating this lie, being complicit in not speaking out. I think it's so, Joy, I think it's even before the 70s.
It was before the 70s.
I don't think post-Civil War is what they were looking at. I think they're looking at 50s, late 40s to 60s, but not after the Civil Rights Movement. I think Make America Great Again is definitely anti-Civil Rights Movement. And it's going back to a time when women were at home.
Yeah. Even in this Miss America series, even the women who were trying to dismantle the progressive women who were making change were themselves caught up in. It's a powerful way, the way that they did the show, but the things that they're fighting against, they themselves were caught in it by this white male patriarchy. We are talking about the same. It was prior to the 70s, Joy, when it first started. It took the show went into that era, but it did definitely start it before that.
And then there's another show I would recommend to your listeners as well. It's called Make America White Again. Sorry. Everything's Gonna Be All White. Everything's
Is that a TV show?
It's a Showtime.
Okay.
But it is really powerful, and it talks about kind of the creation of whiteness in America, and it's a documentary. It's really, really powerful that I encourage people to watch.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, boy, Erin, this, look, there is just so much happening right now. And, I know we're running out of time here, but I do, it does feel a little bit like heading into midterms, like the Democrats do have some wind in their sails. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hopeful that, people are stepping up and getting to the polls and making sure that we protect and turn some seats around, hold on to some of this power. It is my hope and prayer that we can actually make some more progressive changes than, I'm grateful for the starts that I see our president doing to make sure some things are, people are being relieved. But I definitely am paying attention to Elizabeth Warren and, Bernie Sanders, and they're just pushing for further. In fact, I read, I posted it on my page last week. I read the note that Derek Johnson, the president of the NAACP, sent to President Biden, and it was powerful. And I just thought, thank God we have some of these leaders here that are not letting up off the throttle about trying to drive change and trying to help make sure our communities are protected, our kids are protected, that we can actually all start to begin to prosper somewhat.
And
Erin, yeah,
as you know, too, one of the things that I would call our Democrats in the state of Washington too is don't just care about the Black and brown people when you have a vote. Where are you when it's not an election year? Where are you when it's March of next year? Are you going to show up at the NAACP meeting? Are you going to show up and make sure you're buying coffee from a Black coffee shop or a Latinx grocery store? I think it's really easy to show up now and to act like you care, but people are watching. And I think so often, especially the younger generation, is wary of voting right now because they've witnessed this.
Yeah.
And so be honest, be authentic, and continue to show up even after the votes have been cast.
That's real talk, Erin. That is exactly right. And, going into our legislative session for 2023, will we look at these options for kids and their education? Will we actually help the Black businesses recover? I'm one of them that is still trying to recover. Will we do the right things and put the funds and the backing and the resources behind the communities that put all of them in office, because we are all out here working. I so appreciate you making those final comments. I do want to say we do have the chair of the Washington Democrats. She will be on the show in 2 weeks from tonight to have this conversation about what's happening with Washington Democrats. What are we doing? We will be talking about Black community. We are also going to be focusing on some of the races across the state that we need to pay attention to make sure that we're getting the right people elected into these seats. Erin Jones, we are out of time. It was the fastest 50 minutes or 57 minutes of my day, but I'm so grateful that you were able to come in and sub for Miss Stanford, who apparently was watching the show tonight. But I so appreciate, Erin, all the work that you're doing. Thank you for being my sister out there and doing this work. I love you, girl. I can't wait to catch up with you soon. Thank you for coming on. To our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. We will look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday. Next Wednesday's show is going to be about the workplace. So stay tuned. Have a good evening, everybody.
That up in Saks, I favor Black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yo.